Hello, my name is Molly Hamilton and I'm with Lindenwood University's Writing Center. Today I'll be talking to you about research papers. We'll talk about what a research paper does not do, what a research paper actually does, and some good ways to go about writing them. Alright then, let's get started on our quick slideshow. Alright, so before we dig into research papers, it's good to start with a nice review of just the basic parts of a paper. As you can see, we have three parts: the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. With the introduction, we have our hook, which is what we use to get a reader's attention. That's usually a quote, an interesting fact, or a personal story, something just to lure them in. Then we have our background, which kind of sets the stage for what the paper is going to be about and prepare us for our thesis statement. And then we have our thesis, which is the sentence that sets up the paper and tells us what the paper is going to be about. The body of the paper is where all of your main points are going to be that support your thesis. Within the body, we need to have a lot of analysis where we break stuff down and explain it to the reader, and evidence, which is going to be your sources. And of course, to make sure that everything's fair and balanced, we need to have a counter-argument or some opposing viewpoints to kind of balance out our paper and to show that you've been thoughtful about your topic and you've done a lot of research. And then you have to fight against those counters to prove why you take your stance and why you feel you are correct. And of course, our last part would be the conclusion, where you give a review of your thesis, you help that paper go full circle, and leave your reader with something to think about in going forward, and you don't bring up a brand new point. To best understand what a research paper is, sometimes it's good to start with what a research paper is not. First of all, a research paper is not a report. When I say report, I'm meaning that the research paper does not just tell about a topic using sources without analysis. A research paper will dig really deep into a topic and analyze it and break it down and explain it and try to find something new about it or show a new perspective about it. A report is just kind of summarizing what other people say and leaving your own voice out of it. Research papers also do not answer questions that are already answered. A research paper likes to look for something that is new. It doesn't want to explain something that everybody already agrees about. Example, it would be silly to write a research paper about why the sky is blue when most people are already well aware why the sky is blue. A good research paper topic will look for something that is not quite finalized and still has room for debate. Also, a research paper will not just use someone else's research. Instead, it will look at the other person's research and then use it to support their own unique claims and findings. So now let's take a look at what a research paper will actually do. Research papers, as I kind of already mentioned, like to add something new to a topic. Usually, a research paper will look for a gap that's already existing in a body of research. So, for example, let's say a lot of people have done a lot of research with the fairy tale Cinderella. Let's just say everyone has been focused on Cinderella and her shoe. Well, maybe a research paper that's looking for a gap in research would say, instead of focusing on Cinderella and the shoe and what it all means, what if I decided to analyze the prince? And then they might say, the prince used the shoe to find Cinderella instead of trusting his own eyes. What does that mean about him? Was he aware of magic? Was he used to being tricked? Or did he have eyesight problems? Those are the kind of questions that might start a hypothesis. And then the person doing the research could dig in deeper and start looking at what was going on at the time when Cinderella was written, and what did most people think about magic. And then maybe that person would be able to put together a theory as to why the prince used a shoe instead of his own eyesight to look for Cinderella. That would just be a quick example of looking for a gap in the research and using other people's research to try to help support your own. Of course, it's not the best example ever, but it just kind of gives you an idea. So research papers like to add something new, but there are two different types of research papers. We have the argumentative and the informative. With argumentative papers, you're looking to prove your ideas or findings or your theory. You look at the research to try to support your own ideas and claims. With the informative research papers, you want to dive deeper into a topic and try to use your information to show maybe a side of the topic that has not been discussed as much, or try to give more insight to an area that maybe somebody hasn't been going as in-depth with. This type of research paper likes to educate and enlighten its readers, and it also still has the author's unique perspective. It still has that clear voice and not just saying what everyone else is saying over and over and over again. Now, usually when I start talking about adding something new to a paper, I will have students get visibly uncomfortable or a little bit nervous about it because they'll be thinking to themselves, there's hundreds of research papers, actually thousands, maybe even millions. How could I possibly add something new to it? Well, guess what? It's not as bad as you might be thinking. Because luckily, there's only one you, and no one else will think exactly like you. So in order to get something new going, first you need to be familiar with your topic. You need to know what people have already said about it so you don't find yourself kind of repeating what they're doing. Now, for an argumentative research paper, you want to think about questions you might have about something and then see if you can answer your own question. That way you can have your theory set about to prove it and then hopefully discover that you're correct. But if you're incorrect, that still counts. You're still doing research and you can show your findings to your professor. For an informative research paper, you want to know what is most important about the topic to you. How you see the topic could be different from how all the other people see the topic, and what you find to be most important is probably different from what other people find to be the most important. You could ask yourself questions like, what is usually misunderstood about my topic? Or how would this impact somebody if they learned about it or if they understood it? Why does this topic matter? Why is it important? And then that would put a unique spin on what you're discussing. Really, we want all of our papers to show why they are important and why they should be read. So when we're thinking about that thesis statement, which is, a sentence or sometimes up to 4 sentences that talks about what the paper's about, we want there to have that what we call the so what added to it. An example, let's say that my thesis statement is, I don't think it's a good idea for small children to own pet rabbits. Well, if I left it at that, somebody might go, well, she's just not very nice, or she's going to ruin my kid's Easter. However, if I added a so what to it, and then went on to say, because rabbits are extremely delicate due to their anatomy, their diet, and their sensitive nature, that might start making someone go, oh, okay, so there's some reasons why she feels that way. And then if I went on to talk about how domesticated rabbits are some of the most commonly abandoned pets, then maybe the person reading the paper would be much more open to what I was saying. So the part where I'm talking about how they're usually abandoned or they don't come near to living their life expectancy, that would be background information. And the part where I talked about why I don't think they're good for children because they're so fragile, that would be the thesis itself. So a thesis will show what's at stake for the paper. It shows us why the paper is worth investing in, and it gives enough information so we are ready to understand it and begin our journey with the paper. So once you know what you're going to be talking about and what area you're going to dig into to share your wonderful voice with the world, it's best to start with an outline before you start writing that huge paper. Because when you have an outline, you can look at all your main points and then organize them before you write the paragraphs. That way you'll be able to put all of the like points together so they flow well together and it's easy to make a transition between them. At the Writing Center, I love when students come in and we can sit down and brainstorm together, and then we'll group together our main points so it's very simple to connect the ideas when they're actually writing. Also, when you're writing, you want to be aware of the words that you're using. Sometimes writers will have a favorite word or a favorite type of sentence that shows up repeatedly in the paper, and that's not something we want. We want to be aware of what we like to say so we don't oversay it. I know for me, sometimes I'll use the word however a lot, or I will have the word and in a lot of sentences, or as you might hear in this video, I might say also a little bit too much. Being aware of the words that you use frequently are important. Sometimes after a draft, I will read it out loud, and that way I can hear what I'm doing a little bit better than what I see, and then I can use the search bar to dig out how many times I use the word and. Reading the paper out loud also helps you get a better idea of what you're doing grammatically, or maybe you can catch some typos that your eyes have gone blind to, but your ears have not. And of course, it's always a good idea to come down to the Writing Center to get a second set of eyes on it. We would be happy to help you find any kind of errors that you might have missed. Even if you are one of the best writers ever, it's easy to accidentally become blinded to your own mistakes because you've been looking at the paper for so long. Making sure your paper is supported throughout is also very important. You want to make sure that thesis statement, and I know I've already mentioned it a few times, but you want to make sure it is not forgotten and it's obvious how your body paragraphs support it. Sometimes you can guide your readers along and kind of remind them in a way of what this paper is about, or show them how it all ties in with the thesis statement, even if it seems a little obvious. Having peer-reviewed and academic sources are also essential to supporting your paper. You want to make sure that those sources are credible and that they would be approved of by your professor. You don't want to cite somebody who might be inexperienced or might not be as well respected as somebody who has years of study in the subject. If you ever find that you're having trouble finding sources to support what you're saying, it's always a good idea to see our reference librarians. They are wonderful at finding all kinds of information and making sure that the information that they show you is peer-reviewed. That way you know it's safe to use and it would be appropriate for your research paper. But when you're using your sources, again, you want to make sure that you don't overuse them. Now sometimes you have a lot of quotes because what you're saying needs to be supported well, or perhaps that's just the nature of the project, but you don't want to have too many quotes. A lot of block quotes can be seen as lazy, or having a whole bunch of direct quotes could also be frowned upon. It's always good to paraphrase, but even if you're paraphrasing, you still need to make sure that you cite the source. But remember, it's your paper and your voice, so have your sources to back you up, but make sure that you are analyzing it and you are guiding the reader through understanding it. The sources are there to support you. And finally, one last thing, it's important to make sure that you avoid phrases like I think or I believe, because you're the writer, and if you say something, as the reader, I'm going to assume that you believe and think what you're saying. It sounds more confident to not have an I think first. In academic writing, we like to sound confident. Thank you so much for listening to the video, and if you have any questions about anything I covered, or maybe there's something I did not cover, please feel free to contact us at the Writing Center. We'll be happy to help you and get you started on the best writing that you can get. Also, the next slide I'm going to show is going to be our contact information so you can actually contact us at the Writing Center. Thank you again for listening, and happy writing!